In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 436 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Jessica Carr,
Michael O'Malley,
and Andrew Swafford.
In today's episode, we're going to be ranking the top 10 movies of the year in the most definitive list that you'll ever see, no matter
These
what.
are them. These are the best ones.
These are the only ones. If you thought there were other movies this year, you're incorrect.
To be fair, there weren't that many other movies.
That's fair. I don't know about y'all. I really struggled with a top 10 list because I realized I really hadn't seen that much, and that there was just, it was like stuff I really liked, a very small middle class of it was fine, and then a bunch of stuff that I just was like, whatever.
A lot of folks use... Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say, there's exactly one movie that I put on my top 10 list that I'm like, really, really, really like, this is a great movie. And the rest these are good movies. It was a weird kind of year for me. There's like a 9-way tie for second place.
Really inspiring confidence in our list here. There were a lot of folks who submitted to our list who just like gave us a top 5 or a top 6 or a top 7. They didn't feel like they had enough great movies to fill out a full top 10.
My favorite was the list that Grace sent, because Grace didn't just like go, I only saw like 5 movies, so here's my top 5. And then, no, she put movies in specific, like, so she had like her top 2 movies and then 2 blank spots and then a 5th movie and then a blank spot. And I was like, how do you like calculate that? Like, because it was, sorry, I got to just pull it up because I got to go through it real quickly because it was honestly like the only list.
Are we going to start this episode by reading Grace's list?
No, no, it's not even a call out. It's just kind of, I was very entertained by it. I mean, it was just.
Like, I do like the idea that it's like theoretically there could have been 2 better movies than this one.
I take it back. No, it was, she had her first 2 movies. And then she had 3 and 4. She's like, I don't know. And then she had a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 2 honorable mentions.
Amazing.
Jessica,
do you have something you're going to say? I feel like I cut you off or somebody.
No, I mean, basically the same sort of sentiment where, yeah, I mostly watched TV shows this year, honestly, which is kind of crazy, but yeah, there's just like nothing really coming out. A lot of the time I was like, I feel like going to the movie theater, but then I would check what it was, and then I was like, I don't actually want to pay to see any of these things. And I also think that with streaming being so available where you know that like something is just going to hit HBO Max like a month later, you're like, I would rather just watch it for free than pay like $12 to go see it.
Yeah, the window is getting shorter and shorter between things being in theaters and things just being for free on your streaming apps.
Yeah, I was on Disney Plus yesterday, and Michael, we were talking about that Strange World movie, like a month ago, and it's already on Disney Plus.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
Jessica, what's the best TV show?
They just got a new CEO, though, with the intent of bringing back theatrical.
The best TV show of the year is The Boys, which is a very, very good show. And yeah, I started watching it this year completely because I was like, obviously it's like has to do with superheroes, but it's basically like, what if superheroes were bastards, like all of them? And it is like they actually cause, like when they have powers and stuff, they cause damage. Like the opening episode is where a dude who runs extremely fast, like a guy is just walking with his girlfriend and she steps off of the sidewalk and the guy who runs really fast just blows right through her and just completely blows her into pieces. Man. And the guy is just like, oh shit. Like, what do I do now? And then like people who are normal just like are trying to take down the superheroes because they're run by a corporation who is like trying to use them to just make money. And they're basically like a pharmaceutical company who just like inject people with powers to make money. So yeah,
there you have it, folks.
It'd be super good.
Coming to Disney Plus in 2024, they're just going to inject Chris Hemsworth.
I had to talk Andrew off the ledge of putting The Rehearsal on his actual Cinematary top 10.
I probably would have put it there too.
If you would have given me the nudge, I would have done it.
Yeah.
I hope he's okay. I hope Nathan Fielder's okay. That's all I've got to say.
I hope Nathan Fielder's
I hope
okay
that
trying
kid
to come
is
up with a
okay.
second season for that show.
That's true. All right. Well, we can go ahead and jump into it now that we've
Let's
got
do it.
TV talk out of the way. But for the record, I also would put The Rehearsal very, like, in terms of like just
It's number
experiences
one
with media.
for me.
Like, yeah, it would be up there very high for me also. All right. Well, cool. We got our top 10 list. I put the link on Twitter, so if people want to join us live and be like, "The hell you put that one on there?" It's available to you. So.
Oh man.
But yeah, let's go ahead and start out. Number 10, that is you, Andrew.
Yeah, so our number 10 movie of the year, one of my favorite movies of the year, We're All Going to the World's Fair by Jane Schoenbrunn. I hope I'm saying her last name correctly. This is a very strange, sort of unclassifiable movie. It was marketed, I think, as a horror movie to the extent that it was marketed, but it's not exactly that. It is about a young girl who is playing an online role-playing game, but she's not playing a role-playing game like World of Warcraft or something. She's more like in chat rooms, making videos, pretending to play a role in this like larger fantasy, almost like alternate reality world that is kind of being constructed by this community of people online. They are taking what's called the World's Fair Challenge. And I don't know if I could fully describe what exactly the World's Fair Challenge is. It involves like staring at your computer screen while strobing colors flash by you. Videos of her like having these dancing sessions / freakouts. She almost seems as though she's like walking through a waking nightmare or something. But it is not a movie that has traditional horror scare scenes. It is much quieter than that, much more subtle than that. It's kind of a tender movie emotionally. It's very much about this character's loneliness and her isolation and the ways in which she's sort of reaching out to people on the other side of her screen to sort of fill a void in her life. And it is beautiful. It's heartbreaking. It's a little unsettling and creepy. And it's honestly one of the things that I think is one of the biggest selling points of it is that it's just like nothing else. It is like no other movie that you have seen. So if this is a movie that folks listening have not heard of, I would strongly recommend checking it out just to see what you think of it, because it's kind of hard to know how you will feel about it without just watching it for yourself, taking the World's Fair Challenge, so to speak. Yeah, that's my thoughts on this movie. Did any of y'all have other things to say about it?
I liked it. It's cool. There's a lot of movies that are a lot of media in general. I was thinking about this earlier. A lot of media in general nowadays is very explainy, right? It's either there to explain something or to, be expository in some way, like especially documentaries. But like a lot of movies too will like really go out of their way to explain themes, and that's not always a bad thing. Like there's a movie later on down this list that has multiple scenes explaining its themes that I think is really good. But this movie, it does kind of the opposite, in which it like simply presents you with footage. And in some ways it's like found footage. But it's not really in the same format, because found footage movies a lot of times take a fairly recognizable like genre shape. But this is, I don't know, the shape of this is really interesting because it doesn't really explain itself. And so there's a lot of, the ending especially has a lot of like ambiguity in terms of like, what are you supposed to think about it? Like what are your emotions about what you just saw supposed to be? And I think that's nice to have a movie like that to come along that's like just willing to be a little bit esoteric, and I like that.
Esoteric is a good word for it.
Also, Anna Cobb, the main actress here, I'm hoping is going to go on to do big things, because she was really good in this. The only other movie that I've seen that she's in because she's only in a few movies, is Bones and All, the Luca Guadagnino, Timothy Chalamet cannibal movie.
Yeah.
And she plays a kind of secondary role in that. She's also good in that. So get out there, Anna.
Yeah, hopefully she has a long career. Hopefully Jane Schoenbrunn gets more deals to make movies. She has a film coming out with A24 called I Saw the TV Glow that I'm excited for. Yeah,
that could be the title of a Douglas Sirk movie also.
Truly. Jessica, Zach, did y'all have any other thoughts about World's Fair?
I hadn't seen it. It's on HBO Max if you have not seen it, but I have not seen it yet.
Yeah, like I thought that it was going to be a lot more scary than it was, and I was kind of waiting for it to hit the level of like the scary that I thought that it would, because it really is kind of playing on the creepypasta stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember whenever my cousins were like kind of obsessed with that, and they would be telling me about Momo and shit, and like I was like, I don't want to hear this. I was like, la, 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 la. I'm not listening. And I thought that there would be a lot more stuff like that. And I think it kind of plays with it a little bit, where you think like whenever you're watching her when she's like sleeping and she's filming herself sleeping, you think like something really messed up is going to happen, and you're kind of like watching it, and it goes into the creepy a little bit and then kind of like reels it back in, because I think the purpose of the movie is more so kind of like the loneliness of that, and like how all of these like teenagers that are like very interested in all of these like creepy internet lore things are kind of just wanting to have friends, and that they're kind of just wanting to like be obsessed with something that someone else is obsessed with. And that's kind of like the core of the movie. And I get that. And I thought that it did that really well. But I thought it was just going to be more scary. I just kind of had to adjust what I was looking for, like while I was watching it.
I thought it was a horror movie.
Yeah, if you go in expecting Unfriended, it's not that, right? But I think it does capture something about like the strangeness of the internet and like these weird spaces that all of us, but also kids and young people are having to navigate and just feel their way through while struggling with a lot of complicated human emotions. Like it makes the weirder parts of the internet into something that feels much more lived in than it would in a more overtly scary genre movie.
It's kind of a horror movie in the sense of like how some Nicholas Roeg movies are horror movies, in the sense of like it's not really doing the genre conventions, but it's doing something kind of unsettling with like its film form, and the story, the shape it takes is kind of unsettling too. But it's not like a spooky like boo kind of horror movie.
The World's Fair is gonna get you.
That's right.
Well, cool. Like I said, it is on HBO Max for the moment. So if you've not seen it, it is there. But let's move on to number 9, which I believe is you again, Andrew.
This is also me, yeah. So of all the movies on our list, this is the one that maybe pushes the boundary of like, what are we willing to consider a movie the furthest? And that is the Inside Outtakes, which is really a YouTube video uploaded by Bo Burnham, who made Inside last year. Was it last year or was it 2020? I think it was 2020 that Inside came out, right? And this is, you know, if you're being uncharitable, this is just kind of a collection of B-sides and deleted scenes from Inside. I mean, it says as much in the title, right? But I would argue that this does have a sense of cohesiveness to it. It does feel like a true companion piece to Inside. For people who don't know what Inside is, if we have any folks listening who've just not come across it, it is kind of a comedy special / just video art piece thing created by comedian Bo Burnham, where he's performing songs that he's written alone in his the guest house of his house, and doing a lot of like really innovative and creative and imaginative things with lighting and editing to make it feel like such a spectacle. compared to what you would expect from somebody alone in their room playing music to a camera. And the inside outtakes is more of that, but I think that in addition to the songs that are just cut out of the original, this has its own identity as a sort of a look behind the scenes at the creative process. It's way less focused on seeing Bo Burnham deliver these like incredibly polished, very impressive technical feats, and more watching him struggle to make that. So like there's one sequence of it where you're seeing him play the song "Welcome to the Internet," but you're seeing every take he did of the song in like all these little, like laid across a grid on the screen. And every time he fucks up in one of these takes and stops recording, that piece of the grid disappears and you have one less image of Bo Burnham you're looking at. And it really goes to show how arduous and time consuming and tedious just creating anything is. I actually, I'm not trying to do a shameless plug here, but I did record an album this year. I make music. People do not know that. And like, I spent so much time this year doing exactly what you see Bo Burnham doing here, just kind of doing take after take and like spending a lot of time just sort of making fun of myself as I am like working my way through this like slow, gradual process of like piecing something really big like this together. And I've never really seen a film that captures what it's like to do like that boring side of being creative quite like this one does. So I think that if you liked Inside, you will definitely like this. It is a lot more of the same, and it has some of the best material from either movie. There's an amazing track that's like 1 minute long, where one of the only lyrics is "They're really gonna for Dublin," and so like there's some great material here, but it's also kind of an interesting document of not just how Bo Burnham created this thing, but also just how anybody creates anything, sitting alone in the studio, tinkering away at it.
Where did you sit on Inside itself?
Yeah, I was curious about that because that was a very divisive thing.
Yeah, I was a little unsure how to respond to Inside, honestly. There were parts of it that I really liked. There were parts of it that made me concerned for Bo Burnham. I hope that he is okay. This one actually makes me like Inside more because I think it goes to show like how together he kind of has to have it in order to go through this process I've been talking about. It's kind of inspiring, honestly, in a way that Inside was not, personally.
Did either of y'all, Jessica, Michael, did you see it?
I saw it, yeah. I thought it was really good too. I think that Andrew likes seeing kind of like the inner workings of things, like a little bit more. I liked both of them. I like Inside better just because I think it is the final product. Like it is the thing that he was trying to make.
For sure.
I liked the little it to me was like watching a like how we made this thing. Like it was like a documentary of like this is how we made the actual movie type of thing. And so I care about that, and I thought that it was really interesting to see the process, but it was kind of like to me just a bonus. Like it didn't feel to me like something that was just its own thing. It just felt like it accompanied the actual like movie that he made. But I thought that it was really good to see, and I'm interested to see like a couple of years from now how that, because he's like the first person to have ever done anything like that, really. And so I'm really interested to see how that inspires like other filmmakers and other creators to make things that are like that. And he was really like he's like used to be a YouTuber and kind of reflected on that sort of culture like in the movie itself as well. And so it's interesting to see like if people in the future like are going to try to make some more things.
Totally. Yeah, we've talked off and on this show over the years about like the cinematic technicality that goes behind a lot of TikToks and YouTube videos, because people are working with very limited means, like just a camera on a phone usually, but are able to use those like limited editing tools that they have at their disposal to create some really honestly magical stuff. And so I am wondering, like, what is the cinematic landscape going to look like when 80% of people who are making movies were once TikTok teens, right? I think this is maybe like a glimpse forward at that future.
Well, and I hope that they take, the thing also is that it's much more difficult to make a, 60 to 90-minute film that you're tying everything together than make like a little 30-second or a minute long hit for TikTok. And so I think this also shows that, Bo Burnham is somebody who's influenced by that, but also this is also how you piece all of that together to make like a cohesive narrative for, I think it's like a little over 60 minutes inside is. And so that's also very difficult. And so I hope that's also the lesson that you should take away is that is kind of how to piece that together and make a narrative that runs that long.
Totally.
Before we move on, since Andrew is not shamelessly promoting, andrewswafford.bandcamp.com is where you can find his album.
Oh, it is also on Spotify and Apple Music.
Yeah, but you should go to Bandcamp.
You should go to Bandcamp. You should support the independent artists on Bandcamp anytime you can.
There you go. Well, cool. I got number 8. This is one we probably won't spend too much time on since we've talked about it a little bit lately. And that number 8 is Park Chan-wook's new movie, Decision to Leave. For those who have not listened to recent episodes where we've mentioned it, the story, it's from Park Chan-wook, the director of The Handmaiden, among other things, Old Boy, things like that. This one follows a detective who's investigating this death of a man who fell off of a mountaintop. Initially, they rule it a suicide, but then as they as the case moves along, they begin to suspect the deceased man, or at least the detective begins to suspect the deceased wife of being a part of this, but also he's like, she's hot.
The eternal dilemma.
Yeah, he's like, I think she killed her husband, but also I would like to kiss her face. And so that's kind of the course of the movie. Is just like him being cuckolded by her in the fact that he is just like endlessly attracted and in love with her, but also she's like clearly like taking out husbands left and right in this movie. And I don't blame him. She's the wife is played by Tang Wei, who's beautiful. And this one, it's not as, I know we talked about The Handmaid before. I think it was on a top 10 list as well as being, we talked about it in the Best of the Decade series. But this one's not as intricate or it's pretty like the way I described it is pretty straight what it is. It's it is very much like this play off of, Park Chan-wook kind of playing off of some stuff like Vertigo and things like that. It feels very Hitchcockian because it just kind of has like this nervous sexual energy. It's very funny at times. It's very violent at times. It's very goofy at times. Like this detective like has this insomnia, and like there's long periods at the beginning of the movie where he's just like watching her do stuff and recording it. I watched this again recently. It still holds up from the first time I saw it when Andrew and I caught it at TIFF. But yeah, the thing I kind of took away both times watching is that Park Chan-wook just makes these movies, whether they're the greatest of the year or not, that are just endlessly watchable. Like you kind of find little nuances every time, even even if it's as intricate as something like The Handmaiden or Old Boy. This one is not nearly to that level of like plot, like the plot complexity. But it's just, there's just kind of this energy to it that very much holds your attention the entire time, and he just makes good movies, good cinema. That just holds your attention. The way that he directs it is so mannered. Like, he just directs the plot and uses the camera in a way that engages you in these kind of very basic cinematic traditions that I think get lost on a lot of contemporary filmmakers. That just really work. Like the plot, like the script, the acting, and the camera work is all complementing itself in engaging in this fashion to make you, the viewer, like it's constantly engaging and playing with you, the viewer, in a way that I think that's probably why, at the beginning I was like, there's a lot of movies that I watched this year and I was just like, whatever. Because they're not making them like Park Chan-wook makes them. They're forgetting about how to really play with the audience, which is something I think we'll talk about a little bit later with one of our top picks for the year. But yeah, anybody have any additional thoughts on Decision to Leave?
I will say that one way in which Park Chan-wook plays with the audience is he breathes new life into this very tired trope of people spying on other people in movies. Movies have a long history of stories about voyeurism, whether you're talking about something like Rear Window or The Conversation or something like that. And one thing that Park Chan-wook does to liven that up a bit is whenever a character is listening in on somebody's conversation, or they are peeping in their window from across the street, he puts the actor literally in that space where like they are spying into. It kind of creates the strange sense of reality being put somewhat off balance. Like, at any given moment, you have to be assessing as an audience member, is what I'm watching literally happening, or is it some sort of visualization of this character's experience that I now have to sort of like piece together, like how it fits into the rest of my schema for the way this scene is working, or the way this story is unfolding. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, it's not as like twisty and surprising and secretive as something like The Handmaiden, but it still has a lot of like smaller ways in which it's sort of playing with expectations and playing with the reality of the story. It's just really fun to watch him work.
Yeah, I think the last thing I was going to say, or the balance off of you, is it's just fun. It's a very fun movie to watch.
Yeah, I actually rewatched Thirst last night, which is also by Park Chan-wook. It's a vampire movie. I was really interested to see like how it would hold for me. And while I was watching Decision to Leave, I was like kind of thinking about it, because he does a really good job of like playing with the relationship of these like two people who are attracted to each other, but they're both like kind of messed up, and the power dynamic between the two of them. And there's like a bit in Thirst where, because he like turns her into a vampire and she's like miserable, and he used to be a priest, so he kills people. Like, he doesn't kill people, he only goes to the hospital and he just drinks their blood while they're like in a coma, or like he doesn't kill them completely. And when she gets turned into a vampire, she's like, I'm gonna just murder everyone. Like, she just like decides like, I hate my life, I hate you, I hate everything, I'm just gonna kill. And it's like the dynamic between the two of them becomes kind of like she becomes the antagonist of the movie, basically. Like and it's really like the way that he plays with that sort of relationship and that sort of power dynamic is so interesting to me. And it reminded me of that in like this film as well, because like she is specifically killing her husband so that she will get his attention. And they're Like it kind of just goes off of that, and it's like you just want to sit there and eat popcorn and watch it like all day long. Like it just is so spicy to
Good
watch.
pulpy fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking back through Cinematary's lists to find where The Handmaiden ranked for us the year that it came out. We had that movie at number 9.
Oh,
that should have been ranked
stupid.
way higher.
We're dumb. I don't know what to tell you.
The movie was under Hunt for the Wilder People.
I rewatched that recently for the first time since that year, and it still holds up.
It's a good movie.
It's so sad that Taika Waititi died after that movie.
And he was never heard from again.
Yeah, I don't know what he did after that. It's sad. So,
well, he pivoted to making some pretty good TV.
True.
But.
Yeah.
All right. Decision to Leave is on Mubi right now. If you want, I think they're giving away like free trials on that. So worth a free trial to go watch Decision to Leave on Mubi.
So weird that is on Mubi. That should be way more widely available.
That would kill us. Like honestly, if it was like on Netflix or something or HBO Max, it would kill. People would love that. All right, number 7, Jessica.
Number 7 is Bodies.
Hell yeah.
Bodies? Just kidding. It's only 3
I had
bodies.
I had a fourth body on here and I had to fix it.
I
was like, how many bodies?
How many bodies is this movie? But it was like this movie was like kind of a surprise, I think, for a lot of people. Like I was hyped when I saw the trailer because it seemed like very high energy A24 slasher comedy. And so I was already kind of like, yeah, I'm on board with that. But after watching it, it ended up being like way, way smarter than what I thought that it was going to be. And I was reading like some critics' reviews of it, and they were basically saying like, you really like basically halfway through watching it, you kind of adjust your like what you wanted to get out of it because it kind of sets up the story where a lot of these like rich Gen Zers are going to a mansion to have a hurricane party. So there's a hurricane that's about to hit, and so they're like, we're just gonna get fucked up for the entire night. And it's like this group of friends who some of them like they've been friends for a while, and they're like drugs are involved, so there's lots of like weird things, like they all have like weird like resentment towards each other for different things, and like throughout the movie you kind of get like little bits and pieces of that. And whenever it starts, what is it Amanda what's her Amanda. Yeah. So she shows up with her new girlfriend, and you can kind of tell that there's like weird tension between her and the rest of the friend group. This other girl is new, so she doesn't know who to trust. And they decide that night that they're going to play the game Bodies, which is basically just like, I mean, it's kind of like werewolf, right? Like like somebody is the killer, but then people start actually dying, and then you're like, oh shit, is someone killing them? But like halfway through the movie, there's like a little situation where you're like, wait a second, and it starts kind of like unfolding. Are we doing spoilers? Is this a spoiler?
Well, you already said that the wife killed the husband to get the protagonist's attention and Decision to Leave, so we might be doing spoilers.
You should have watched them, y'all.
You should have watched the movie. Anyways, but yeah, so it turns out that there isn't actually a killer. The first person who died is Pete Davidson, and he was making a TikTok with a machete, and he accidentally kills himself.
That's awesome.
Like
it's such a good twist. I hope that we have not ruined that movie for anybody by giving that twist, but I love that twist.
Yeah, and so like the whole movie is basically just a sick burn on Zoomers, and how if there was one night where they had no access to electricity or the internet or anything, they would go absolutely insane by just accidentally killing themselves or killing each other.
So, having not seen this, that sounds like an old man take. Does this movie kind of feel like cranky, like old manish in that regard?
I don't think that it is quite as much of a like dunk fest on Zoomers as maybe Jessica sees it as, or maybe as the marketing has presented the movie as. Like it reads more to me about the ways in which our relationships are much more complicated, and like seeking truth is much more difficult in the age of the internet, because of the ways in which like we're constantly sort of like talking behind each other's backs. Like that, I think we as millennials who grew up in an era like before social media was like the norm when we were kids, probably do not truly know the feeling of like social coercion and bullying that exists specifically in like an online mediated space. And this feels like it is taking people who have like been simmering in that like pressure cooker, and then like sticking them all in the same place, and then like pulling the plug from their what they might go to for a break from one another, and like seeing the ways in which those social dynamics just sort of implode because of the unhealthy ways that the internet has sort of conditioned us to talk to and about our friends.
Sounds good. As an old man, I get behind it.
Exactly. I also think that if Zoomers were to watch it, I think that they would like it and think that it was very funny.
A lot of my students have watched it and liked it a lot. Yeah. So I don't think that it's reading as condescending to Zoomers.
Okay. All right.
But I will say, I think that it's awesome that it was a like female team that made the movie.
Yeah.
So it is directed by Helena Regine, and then the screenplay is done by Sarah DeLapp. So the fact that we're getting more female directed and written movies is super cool.
Oh yeah.
And also like breakout performance by Rachel Sennott, who is in Shiva Baby, and she gave an amazing performance in this as well. And I think that her career is like about to blow up. I think that she is gonna be in like more and more indie movies for sure.
She talked about masturbating on.
She also delivers one of the most relatable speeches of the year when she talks about how difficult it is to start a podcast. The cast in general is really good in Bodies. Like everybody is kind of utilized. There's a lot of like stunt casting that is done with great purpose here. Like everybody, the movie knows that like Pete Davidson is like the bankable star, so they present him in the marketing as like the reason you're coming to see this movie, and then they kill him off like so early in the movie, and he comes back in that like delightful way at the end. It also features a really good performance by Lee Pace, who's like not of the same generation as the rest of this cast, and the fact that he's not of the same generation is like a point of tension in the movie. It also has Maria Bakalova, who people would know from Borat's subsequent movie film, and her casting is interesting because she's a Bulgarian actress, English is her second language, and she's also not really a household name yet. So she's sort of the POV character in a lot of ways, but there's more to her character than you would expect based on kind of the star power at play in this movie. It's really thoughtfully put together, I think. Among the best thrillers of the year for sure.
I just like that you said the full title of the Borat sequel instead of just saying Borat 2.
It matters.
He's like, actually, it's Borat's subsequent movie film. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. I think Bodies is making the streaming rounds now, so you can find it there. And Pete Davidson, Janet Leigh of our generation? ?
I don't know about that one.
All right. All right, Jessica, I'm going to send it back over to you for number 6.
All right. Our number 6 movie is Nope.
More like, yep.
Yep.
We're still making those puns.
Yep, this is our number.
They don't get
16.
old.
They do.
So this is directed by Jordan Peele and came out during the summertime. It's his third feature movie. And he's doing his thing with Monkey Paw and making those horror movies that have some social satire in there.
You sound like an old lady. Like, he's making those horror films with the social satire in there.
But yeah, like I really liked this movie. I think that people liked it less than Get Out for sure, and probably a little bit less than Us. But personally, it's kind of like obviously Get Out is number one, but I think that Us and this movie are kind of like the same sort of thing. Like I would put them both at 2. If I were making a list of the top 3, I would still have Nope and Us on the second spot. But it basically, I mean, I don't think I need to go over the plot. I think that most people know, but it's like a brother and sister who are on like a California horse ranch, and they rent out their horses to be in movies, and their dad dies in a super horrific way, and they're both having to try to figure out how to keep the business going. And there's like weird shit happening like on the farm, and horses start disappearing, and like weird UFO stuff starts happening, and they're trying to figure out like what is going on, what thing is like terrorizing them. And I don't think that I'm an alien movie kind of person. Like I like Alien obviously, but like not like I don't really care about UFO stuff. My dad like loves watching the, what is it called, like Secret Aliens or whatever on the History Channel.
Ancient
Guy with the
Aliens.
hair.
Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
Like and he loves like UFO conspiracy stuff, and like he was like in the military, so it's like he loves like all that Area 51 stuff. But I've never really cared about it. I'm kind of like, if aliens exist, then whatever, then that's fine. I'm not I don't really care.
Good for you, aliens.
Good job.
I exist too.
Big whoop.
But like this, I think this movie was, I think Signs and also this movie were one of the only alien movies that made me genuinely kind of scared. Like if aliens existed, then the fact that they could just suck us up into like this thing that could crush us to death, like that is like genuinely scary to me. And the scene in Nope that I still continue to have nightmares about and think about is whenever the like jean jacket, which I guess is what they call the UFO alien thing, like sucks up all of Steven Yeun's like arena of people and the horses and all of the equipment and like the stand and all the metal, and like sucks all of those people up, and you get like a POV view of what it would be like to just be inside of that and like hearing everyone screaming, and that shit is so scary to me. Like I was just like, this is genuinely terrifying to me. But so that automatically gave the movie points of just like some like a new experience for me to be terrified of, but also showing it in a cinematic way that made me feel like I was in it, or there was a possibility of me ever being in it, which is really interesting. Like I think the sound design like also helps with that, because you just like hear people like screaming and what the sounds would be like inside of it. And it's amazing. I'm glad that I watched this in a theater too. I think it's a really good theater movie because you get like the full sound experience, but also like all of the visuals of the UFO thing just like floating in the clouds and like hiding in the clouds. And like legitimately, like after I watched the movie, I was looking up all the time and being like, I don't know if this cloud looks different or not. And I thought that it was like really effective in that way. But I think that if I were to give it some criticism, I would definitely say that like I don't think that the writing is as tight, and I don't think that the story is as tight as like Get Out. There's lots of I think that he's like becoming known for having kind of like twisty thriller-y horror movies where it's like puzzles and you have to like look at stuff and put things together. And there were lots of things in Nope that just like kind of didn't make sense and didn't go anywhere. And like all of the stuff with the killer monkey, like I didn't care about that at all. And the fact that it kind of became like iconic for the movie where people were like dressing up as the chimp or
Are
whatever.
you kidding? I
Really?
did not see that.
Oh my gosh! Really?
Yeah.
I missed
Oh, wow.
that too.
Is like kind of makes me wonder if that was like a thing, like if that was on purpose, like if it was like a marketing thing where they're like, you have to have something iconic in this movie
People dress up
where
as.
yeah, for people dressed up as, and I was like, just dress up as Steven Yeun. Like, did you see what
true.
he looked like
Yeah,
in
that's
the
true.
movie? But overall, I liked it, and I hope that his movies continue to be good, and that he doesn't get sucked into the money making system, and that he is still like allowed to have like creative freedom and that sort of thing.
Luckily, all of his movies though have been widely, like they've been super successful. Like he's not somebody like Damien Chazelle who made Whiplash and La La Land, which were super successful, and he's made First Man and Babylon, which completely tanked. Like I could see that dude.
Damien Chazelle's in hot water right now.
Yeah, I could see him like being stuck in some like Disney project pretty soon because he's made two bombs. But like Jordan Peele's been he's been successful not only as a director but as a producer. So I feel like he's set up to be okay for the future.
He's one of the only directors who's truly a household name for people now. So I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, and we've talked about his movies, but like good on Jordan Peele just for bringing auteurism to the public consciousness again.
Yeah, especially
like
with
his movies are
movies.
his own. Yeah.
Like I was thinking about him recently in kind of relation to the Fablemans with Spielberg, and like I was thinking about how Jordan Peele, I hope he's making movies for a long time because he seems like a really interesting, like old man filmmaker to me. Like Jordan Peele, when he's like older and has been making movies for like 10, 20 years, sounds super interesting to me. Anyway.
Well, and the one thing I was going to say about this movie is I think that I'm like in the minority here in the sense or maybe in the minority in general, which is that I like that his movies have become a little bit less coherent because like he reminds me of like in specifically this way. He's not really similar to this filmmaker in other ways, but in specifically this way, he reminds me of Spike Lee in the sense of like his claim to fame as a filmmaker is this very pristine movie. For Spike Lee, that would be like Do the Right Thing, and in Jordan Peele's case, it was Get Out, in which like it is like this socially conscious, like really energetic, really fascinating, but also like very clean. Like all the themes are like very like like galaxy
Legible.
brain laid out and both Spike Lee and him have revealed themselves to be much more like interesting filmmakers than simply like I'm going to create these like meticulously constructed like music box films for the rest of my career. And like I really like the fact that like for instance like Nope is like interested in like a bajillion things, including like French philosophy of the spectacle, like for whatever reason. Like there's just like I don't know, like that indicates to me like the fact that his movies are increasingly like bursting at the seams with what they can try to contain makes me feel good about his long-term prospects. Because as much I do like Get Out, and I feel like that's his most like his cleanest and most accomplished film. I don't know that I would say it's the film of his that I'm most interested in, because it's the film that I watched and I can continue to watch, and it's entertaining in exactly the same way each time I watch it. Sure. And I don't think that that's the same for Us or Nope, which are messy films where like I've not rewatched Nope, but when I rewatch Us, like different things stick out to me, and there's different little like burrows that I can like go down. I don't know. So I'm really interested to see what he does in the future, just because it doesn't seem like he's interested in doing like a specific thing,
Mm.
and I like that.
I would compare him not to Spike Lee, but to M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah, no,
who,
that's
like,
another good.
is just kind of chasing his own interests and like putting these like really bizarre scenarios on the screen. Like his movies do fit into these genre tropes. Like Nope is sort of a Western mashed up with a sci-fi movie, but it's also so utterly its own thing. In a way that like your mileage is going to vary as an audience member on, because like he's just wanting to surprise audiences. He wants to make new kinds of stories.
That is a good comparison. I think I chose the Spike Lee comparison out of hopefulness that he's not going to have a like wilderness period of like making Avatar or whatever, like M. Night Shyamalan did. So keep the faith.
Keep the
Jordan
faith.
Peele. Don't start adapting Will Smith vanity projects or whatever.
We were acting like Old wasn't our #1 movie of the year last year.
No, I love M. Night Shyamalan now, but like he's definitely got some dodgy stuff in there.
That's for sure.
Interesting.
Oh, don't worry. Knock at the Cabin's going to be #1 next year. Reed is
Dude,
already.
I'm legitimately my most look forward to movie of next year.
I'm so excited. Yeah.
I will look forward to Jordan Peele's Happening though. Whenever that occurs.
Well, Nope, it's on. I think you can stream it on Peacock now. But yeah, I feel like it's one of those. I would be curious to see how it had like the legs it has sitting at home watching it compared to being in a movie theater to watch it.
Good question. Yeah.
So, well, do you want to take a break or just like power through?
Let's take a break.
All right. We'll be back. We'll be back after these messages.
All right.
All right.
Let's see. What episode number is this?
436. I'm battling my dyslexia on episodes. Episode.
I'll go get some more water.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Hopefully Andrew will straighten himself out. He was like behind.
Oh, no, you're right.
It's freaking me out. 1 second. This is great. Great stream. Shit. I'm gonna mute Andrew. It's loud. Shameless sponsored plug. How's the bakery going, Jessica?
That's going pretty good. Oh, it was pretty busy for December, so that was nice.
A bunch of people buying that stuff for Christmas and things.
Yeah, it was like a lot of people who were buying for like work parties and that sort of thing. So that was cool. Thanksgiving was like pretty slow because I think they just wanted like white people stuff. Like
they were like, I need pumpkin pie and other boring things.
Pretty much. So that was, I got like 1 or 2 orders, but not a ton. And then football season was the worst ever. Like UT people, whenever there's a home game, they take all the parking in Market Square and then they just don't buy anything.
Yeah.
And so I make like 1/4 of what I normally do, like during that. So my plan for next year is to just try to do more wholesale stuff.
Destroy college football.
Yeah. So we'll see. Should be fine.
Cool.
I got a sleepy doggy.
Oh.
It's a sleepy doggy.
So I'm going to see at 2:00 today, Avatar 2. And what is advertised as the world's tallest IMAX screen.
Oh my gosh. Is that in Savannah?
Yeah, but I think it was world's tallest for like a week, and then a new theater was built, and then somewhere else, and then that was the world's tallest. But it's like it's like $20 a ticket just to go to like see, and I'm like, this is
That's the use.
Yeah, I'm like, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it once, and it's gonna be Avatar, which is just like so.
I'm gonna have a chance next week to see a movie, and I think the 3-hour movie I'm gonna go see is Babylon. I'm just gonna because otherwise, I'm never gonna see it again.
Yeah, I'll be curious. Hopefully, we can talk about it once you've done that. Because I'm
on board with Damien. I know there's the skeptics, but
yeah, I mean, I loved the first 2 movies. I loved First Man also. I've liked
good. He's
I've
3
liked
for
all
3.
I liked all his movies. This one, no.
Yeah. Did you watch it?
Mm-hmm. I saw it over Christmas.
Oh boy.
I was like, this dude took like his grad school notebook and just like shook it all out from the whole movie.
Shook it on the Boogie Nights, apparently.
Yeah, shook it on the Boogie Nights and was just like, I can do this. And you were like, eh. The only highlight is at the end of the movie when Tobey Maguire shows up for this extended cameo, and Tobey Maguire is like getting his money's worth. It's great.
Are you talking about Babylon?
Yeah.
Oh man, that looks awful.
Yeah, I don't think you would like it at all. It's also like here's my like slate think piece. It's also the second piece of media in the last few years that has just completely done Anime Wong as like a figure of film history terribly.
What's the other one?
They had her in that Ryan Murphy the like revisionist Hollywood series. I forgot what it was called on Netflix. And that I guess they didn't do too much with her there. And then this one, they have a character that's pretty much based on Anime Wong, and like it doesn't really give her much personality other than, Chinese immigrant / lesbian. And you're just kind of like, yeah, but she did a lot more than
a person.
Yeah, like she was, and so I was at the they're following Margot Robbie's character. I'm like, yeah, the Anime Wong character is 20 times more interesting than this. So really, I'm just asking for like an Anime Wong biopic where they can like actually like let her live her life instead of just using her as like a diversity token in your classic Hollywood setup. But no, it's very much like Damien Chazelle doing a line of Kenneth Anger Coke and making a movie.
People keep describing it that way. I think that sounds awesome.
Lines of Kenneth Anger Pokes. Yeah,
he's not the guy
that
who
is
should
threatening
be
with a
doing
good
that.
time.
It's like he did that, and then but Damien Chazelle strikes me as like a person who is like that was the first time he ever did coke, and then is like bugging out and scared. Like you needed somebody with like who's like an insane person making it.
David Lynch make that movie.
Yeah, like this. He seems like a very sane normie person who's just like making this insane movie. He's just like, ooh, look, they're having sex in the middle of a party, and you're like, yeah, that's cool, guy. It's crazy in here.
I'm into it.
Andrew, what's the dog hang situation?
Oh, good question. I forgot to ask. I would say that. Hold on, I can actually run and ask right now if you are willing to wait.
Yes, that sounds good.
I'm gonna mute him again because he's loud. But yeah, I'll be curious to see what you think, Michael.
Yeah, I just feel like it's one of those movies that if I don't see it in the theater, it's gonna like crumble into dust. My motivation to see it is gonna crumble to dust.
Yeah, it's worth seeing in a theater. I don't know.
We'll see.
None of the performances really stuck out to me, other than the woman who plays the Anime Wong character. So.
Okay. So answer to dog hang is yes. Would you be willing to bring Lou over here and just have them hang out in the backyard?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Nice.
I will send you Cassie's number so y'all can coordinate.
Oh, I have it already.
Oh, you have it? Cool.
Yeah, we exchanged numbers at the party.
Sweet.
All right. Y'all ready to talk about the crimes of the future?
Let's talk about the
Ill
crimes of.
I don't have a
crimes.
joke for it. Like that's just the title of the movie.
Yeah.
All right, here we
Let's do
go.
it.
In 3, 2, 1. And we're back for part 2 of episode 436, which is our top 10 movies of 2022. Andrew, bring us back with tell us about the crimes.
All right, let's talk about the crimes, not the crimes of the present, nor the crimes of the past,
Oh,
but specifically the crimes of the future.
The
Which
worst
is our number
kind.
5 movie. This is directed by the one and only David Cronenberg. Daddy Cronenberg, as I have taken to calling him, since his son is also out in the world making really good horror movies. But this is it has sort of been David Cronenberg's quote unquote return to form in a sense. Not to say that the movies that he's been making for the past 10, 15 years are not good movies. Just that this feels like a very David Cronenberg movie. It is him kind of doing the things that he became known for in like the 80s and the 90s. This film actually is very similar to Crash in a lot of ways, which is my favorite David Cronenberg movie. Actually did a whole podcast with one Seth Troyer where we talked about that movie. But Crimes of the Future has sort of this really preposterous setup that I will need to spend some time explaining, but maybe not so preposterous as it might seem on the surface. In the indeterminate future, humans have been so like gradually changed by the microplastics that they have been consuming in their food and their like household products, that their actual like DNA is starting to change. And specifically the way in which their DNA is changing is that their pain tolerance is much higher.
Seems like the best possible scenario for the microplastics in our bodies.
Well, hold that thought. So because people's pain tolerance is higher, they're just kind of feeling less, right? And so some things that humans do for like sensory pleasure, like sex, don't necessarily have the same physical, visceral appeal that they once did, because people are kind of like their nerves are just sort of numbed to a certain extent. So the way in which the human race is responding to this is by having kind of rougher and rougher sex to the point where there's a scene early on where you see two random people making out like in an alleyway, and one of them has a knife and they're like cutting into the other one, like as a way of taking like kinky pain play to like the next dystopian level. And specifically, there is a new form of sex that is emerging in which
new sex dropped.
New sex just dropped, David Cronenberg said. And the new sex that has dropped is people performing surgery on each other. And this movie specifically follows a man named, what is his character's name? It's ridiculous. Saul Tenser, played by Viggo Mortensen, who is a very political performance artist who he is taking a stand against the way in which the pharmaceutical industry, the food and drug industry, etc., has so corrupted the human body that he like has his microplastics or has like these new organs that the microplastics are creating in his body, has them publicly taken out of his body. And so he's trying to claim to the world, like, look at this awful thing that industry and capital is doing to the human body. Meanwhile, his audience is totally getting off on it because they like seeing the surgery. Like it's this exhibitionist thing that he's doing. He doesn't necessarily know that he's doing that or doesn't intend to be doing that. Meanwhile, his partner, Leah Seydoux, is like this performance artist in a different way. It's like she's a musician or something like this, a very famous like technical craftsman of surgery, and people show up in droves to like see her specifically do the surgery on Viggo Mortensen. And I don't want to say more about what happens in this movie. Kristen Stewart is in it.
Amazingly in it.
She has an amazing role. There is also a guy covered head to toe in ears. That happens at one point. You just kind of got to see this movie to believe it. And David Cronenberg is such a fucking good filmmaker that he can make things like in Crash, for example, he can film a car crash in a way that it is meant to feel as erotic as the characters see it as. And he does a similar thing to some of the surgery scenes here, where it's like, I don't like what's happening on screen, but the cinema is making me feel as though I do. It is some wild Galaxy Brain filmmaking. Among my favorite David Cronenberg movies, honestly, like top 3 for me. So that's my big rec for Crimes of the Future. If you feel like you can stomach it.
I'm just not going to take a sip of coffee next time when you say ear person.
The funniest thing about the ear person is in the movie, it's considered he's just a hack. Like he's like a guy who's trying too hard in the art world.
Incredible.
Anybody else see Crimes of the Future and want to add anything?
It's really good. I think there are a lot of times when people talk about that, like, oh, you know, this movie feels like a cyberpunk movie or whatever. But I think like David Cronenberg is one of the only filmmakers who actually makes movies that feel like he's read the cyberpunk movies rather than knowing that like, oh, this is just about like a future in which technology is out of control or whatever. Like this truly feels like a new wave sci-fi novel. Like it has that feel. If you've read like Philip K. Dick or J.G. Ballard or like those sorts of like guys, or like William Gibson, like I know the first 2 are not really cyberpunk, but like it's got that like really wildly inventive, but like confusingly inventive style to it that I think is just really good, and very few filmmakers do. Maybe his son is the only other one I can think of who makes a movie like true. That. It's good. Like has he written a novel? I want to read his novel.
Oh, does he usually?
No. I'm saying like if were he to write a novel, I would like to read it.
Well, like, wasn't this movie, he made this movie earlier, but he didn't have the same sort of like money, right?
No, I think like he just took the title. I don't think because he isn't like one of his very first films.
Jessica is somewhat right, or no. Yeah, I think Jessica's right in that like he wrote the script for this in the 90s. And then it sat in a drawer somewhere for a very long time until somebody approached him and said, like, hey, microplastics are in the news constantly now. You need to make this movie. And I think he's updated it in a couple ways to make it feel like more like it's speaking to the time. But I guess that's one reason why it feels like old school Cronenberg, because it literally is.
I'm imagining the guy from The Graduate who talks about plastics, but he's talking about microplastics this time, and he's at a party and David Cronenberg.
I don't think Cronenberg has written a novel, by the way.
He needs to. He's got a finger to the pulse of something like literary in addition to cinema.
Oh wait, no, there's a writing section. Did he draw? Yes, he has written a novel.
All right, I'm going. I'm doing it.
Consumed. The first novel by Canadian filmmaker, screenwriter, and actor David Cronenberg. The novel is driven by a globe-trotting photojournalist couple that pursues stories featuring rather unusual people.
Sounds generic, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Yeah, like this movie was like genuinely way funnier than I thought it was going to be. There are like lots of parts in it that were just downright hilarious, honestly. Like there were also like funny memes that came out of it too, where it was like a lot of the time Viggo Mortensen was like in a cloak and he's like doing like this.
Oh my
and
gosh,
he's
just like a little Jedi.
Yeah, he's just like he's just sitting all cozy, and then Kristen Stewart will come around and she's like, oh my gosh. And she's like so nervous around him and just like whispering, and somebody like put they basically did like a shot for shot of The Simpsons where it looks exactly the same.
Where he is did just it. Crimes of the Future.
And I like that Cronenberg is like, I'm gonna make freaky shit and I'm gonna like have a commentary on like corporations like ruining people and people getting desensitized, but also it's gonna be a little funny. Like it's like there's gonna be like a little bit of funny stuff in it. And like the one part that really sticks with me is whenever he just like Viggo Mortensen's character just has a flap. Like his stomach is cut and he just has like that flap, and she, in order to pleasure him, just like does she lick his flap? Is that what happens?
I don't remember. There's a lot of flap licking in Cronenberg movies. I might be getting it confused with other.
They're just in an alleyway, and she's just like, she's just getting in the flap, and I was like, this is, and I was like, this is so gross, but for some reason it's so funny to me, and I was like, I don't know why. And I hate, like, I don't really like gore and stuff in movies, and I genuinely was like, I didn't know if I was going to be able to stomach the surgery scenes in this, because they show everything. They show all the organs, like they're all there, and
including some new ones too.
Yeah, I think the humor part of it like helped me be able to watch it, because like I think having that helped. Like Possessor, which is by his son, is also just like very gory and very, but like that there's no humor in it at all. It is like there's nothing. Like it's like very, very dry, and it was very hard for me to stomach like the violence in that and the body horror because of how like dry it was. And so I think adding the humor was just like really good. Also, I nominate the last shot of this film as the best last shot of 2022.
You know, that's a strong case. Yeah, I would have to think about other movies' last shots, but it is a great.
There's one other last shot.
Coming up, the last shot of Fabelman's. Yeah. I would put that above Crimes of the Future.
I do love that the two like maestros of like avant-garde like body horror, like whatever, their names are David and Brandon. Just like amazing names for what they do.
Well, the Crimes of the Future it's about the flap licking you make along the way. So it's on Hulu now if you want to, get crazy with it. Our number 4 movie is RRR. Actually, if you type in RRR, it brings up RRR, a 2004 film, but this is from 2022. This is a Telugu language epic that dropped in Hindi on Netflix earlier this year. It comes from filmmaker S.S. Rajamouli, and it is an epic. That's an epic action drama. According, with dancing. But let me see if I can distill this thing down to a log line. It's tough. So you have these two. All right, you have these two revolutionary figures. One who is within because this takes place in the 1920s. One a part of the occupying British forces. One who I don't think is initially like a revolutionary figure. He just lives in this kind of village deep in the jungle, but is radicalized by the British just being the British in 1920s India. And it's really the journey of them kind of finding each other and then breaking away and then finding each other once again, finding their purpose through that.
It's a bromance.
But it is. We got a lot of good in our top 5. We got a lot of bromances going on. But yeah. So the large part of the first portion of the movie is just kind of introducing these two characters, and then they come together and meet, not knowing who really either person is. And it's a big for the second part of the movie, and it's a big. I also like it's a big old fat middle finger to the British. You have like these. It's kind of, you kind of have the role reversal of, for a large portion of film history, you have these very stereotyped, stereotypically programmed figures, non-white figures in cinema. You'll have maybe a black character or an Asian character in movies that are very like programmed to just be like how white people perceive others. In this one, it's like the most stereotypical British people of all time, and it's great. Like almost laughably programmed, where they're just like, they're all talking like Mary Poppins and sipping tea and just colonizing, and then it's the whole movie.
They can't dance.
Yeah, that can't dance, and the whole second half of the movie is just like, let's just eradicate all of that. And this was when it started getting some buzz. I think just through the letterbox and through the internet of people saying this thing is crazy. You got to check it out. It popped up on Netflix, and there's a little bit of controversy with that whole thing that I'll just kind of put to the side for a second. But I watched this earlier this year, and this is a fucking movie. Like full ass fills the pot of like, this is a whole fucking movie. It's got dancing, it's got romance, it's got bromance, it's got action, and not just like action. It's got probably
some of the best action in movies in
ever.
Like the last decade. Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's probably the height and definitely the bar being set of, this is how you want not only action, but like modern action where you're incorporating a lot of digital effects and CGI into it, where it incorporates that, but doesn't feel like, it feels incredibly choreographed and directed. Like it feels much more tangible than like watching Captain America fight somebody or something like that. Like this feels very much like it's like you can just feel the action just permeating through the screen. And it's honestly,
and it's funny too, because it's not like especially convincing effects. Like you can always tell when it's an effect, but it does feel very much like more tactile and like has a lot more oomph to it than like, a lot of modern like American effects driven stuff.
Yeah, because there's a lot of the film has incredibly CGI'd animals, because as they make it, they have this giant disclaimer at the beginning that they're like, yeah, we didn't harm any animals. And you're like, okay. But then once you get to the movie, you're like, I understand why they put that, because there are animals tearing up people and being torn up by people. And yeah, the CGI is important for that. And like honestly, one of the most like briskly paced 3-hour movies, because this is a whole ass 3 hours. But at no point are you like looking at your watch? Are you going, how much more of this do we have? Like you're locked in, because
this thing cooks.
Yeah, this thing cooks. And like I was thinking, because I just rewatched Avatar yesterday. And like James Cameron, for all his faults, the dude knows how to pace some action. Like whenever the action starts in a James Cameron movie, that dude knows how to like handle it and like give you exactly what you want and then get out before it gets kind of old. This one is very much like SS Rajamouli like knows what the fuck he's doing. The action is so well staged, so well blocked, is so well choreographed. Like you never. It doesn't have what, again, it just feels so like such a breath of fresh air from watching a lot of American action movies, including ones that like I put on my list this year, where it's a lot of shot, reverse shot, like you're watching superhero kind of punch and fight with the person and then kind of reverse it. They kind of have tried to make it much more free flowing and kinetic with stuff like John Wick, but it really doesn't
Mhm.
have the same effect. I think this is the closest you're going to get to this in American filmmaking recently is probably Mad Max Fury Road, where you're like,
Yes.
you don't only have like people fighting each other, but you have just like planes of fighting going on that you're bouncing between kind of seamlessly, because at times in this you have the characters completely separated from one another, but it's edited together to feel like it's edited together to feel like they're like right next to each other fighting.
Mhm.
And you just kind of, you have different, it's not, and again, it's not just hand to hand, you have so much different like styles of fighting and set pieces. There's a set piece at one point when the kind of characters come together where you have one who's riding this motorcycle and you have one who's like who's more on the ground, and they like come together and are like swinging on this apparatus on a bridge to get this person who's in the water where there's like fire swarming around them. And
This
like
is the moment when the two characters meet. Actually, this is the meet cute.
this is when they meet, and it's just and like the whole apparatus of the set piece is insane, because they're swinging on this bridge. There's a motorcycle involved. There's fire in the water. There's a kid in the middle of the fire in the water, and it is just like enrapturing. You're like, what the fuck is going on right now? But every part of it is incredible. And so it just kind of, I think any other year, this would have been like mind-blowing action filmmaking, but especially as you know, as we kind of live through the American market of just like really uninspired, just bland action filmmaking. I think, you know, a movie that we're going to talk about at the top end of this podcast, I think is, a lot of people have responded to it because it feels very fresh and kinetic in the way that they're trying to depict the scenes in a way that kind of is counter to what the norm is with things, with just not even just Marvel products, but just action in general when it comes to American filmmaking. And this just feels very, like, it feels very much like it's engaging with the audience, going, we're gonna give you like true spectacle, like you know, forget any sort of like, you're not gonna, it's very much a turn your brain off and like just experience the action type of filmmaking. And it's, I would recommend kind of going back to there's a lot of, I don't think it really like it doesn't totally encompass the movie in terms of like, there's a lot of politics going on behind the scenes that, and we talked about it a little bit on the podcast, that as like American viewers, we're not super up to date on what's happening here. But there's been a lot of really interesting writing I found on Letterboxd and other places, kind of talking a little bit more in depth and really nuanced about how about the history that's being portrayed here, about the language, the kind of changes in language. You're watching a Hindi version on Netflix, but Telugu is the language that it was properly supposed to be portrayed with. And so there's just kind of this historical precedent there that kind of complicates things. But I don't know. At the end of the day, it's kind of, you know, there was a really good podcast that Film Comment did, kind of comparing this to Top Gun Maverick, which are these very like nationalistic propaganda ridden films, and how both of these films are like seeped in this ideology, this nationalistic ideology, but also are these like shining achievements of just action blockbuster filmmaking that I would recommend people subscribe, you know, checking out, rather than me trying to, you know, regurgitate what they're talking about there. But I think they both came to the conclusion that like RRR is just like this epic achievement of action that if you just want to experience a spectacle of filmmaking, you should watch RRR. And I kind of co-sign that. But I'm going to turn it over to y'all, because I know everybody else. I think everybody else has seen it, or
I don't think Jessica's seen it.
Oh, okay.
No.
But
I don't have anything else to add. I would just co-sign everything that you said. This is among the best action movies we've had in a very, very, very long time. I'm surprised it isn't rank higher for us. I thought it might be number one at one point in the year. And I think that the point of comparison to Fury Road is very apt. And I think that people should be as hyped for this movie as they were about Fury Road when it came out. But it's mostly not because it's a 3-hour Indian film and people are just not choosing to not sit down and watch that. But it is a fantastically worth your time.
Yeah.
I agree. And I would also say that I'm not like super well versed in the world of like 2010s, like 21st century, like Asian action cinema, but there's like a whole, not just in India, but in like, other countries in like specifically like Southern, Southeast Asia, like there is a vibrant, culture of action filmmaking that is maybe not quite to this extent, but in a lot of ways compared to the American counterparts, like still in this like very vibrant, creative, energetic mode that like, if people like this, there's a lot more films that could scratch this itch.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recommend that people get into that if they can.
Yeah, just from the director himself, he has a lot of movies where Ram Charan, the one of the lead actors, he's in a lot of his other movies, and I've seen a bunch of people kind of pointing to those as like, if you like this, you'll definitely dig what he's doing here because it's very much in the same mode. I hope you watch this, Jessica. I think you would love this movie. I think you would love the bromance a lot. Like, I think you would love the two lead characters and how they interact with one another. I think you would enjoy this movie a lot.
Yeah, it's on my Netflix list. It's always the daunting runtime that is like,
That's
am I gonna sit here and do this or what?
This movie also benefits. Like, you could break this into 2 sittings easily because there's a part 1 and part 2. Like, it is there's a very like clean halves to this movie if you feel daunted by the runtime. Because I usually, my life is such that right now I don't have a ton of time to sit down for like very long movies, and so I often watch movies in multiple sittings, which I did for this one as well, and it worked fine.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's also a movie that you'll like you'll hit the part 2 and you'll be like, oh, like, really, we're already to part 2. There's so much happening. But yeah, I would encourage whether you break it up or watch it like whatever, just watch this movie. It's a hell of a time. And I think it'll piss you off about what is playing in theaters now. You're just like, look at all the possibilities we could be scratching. All right, number 3, Michael, we're gonna make you talk finally.
Yeah. So this one was actually my number 1 movie of the year on my ballot. And I just talked about it a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and so I don't know how much like fresh stuff I'm gonna have to say about Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans, but it's still good. I think that this is a great movie, and like I said the other weeks, like it's great not just because like the movie itself is great, which is true, but it is like freighted with all of the entire weight of Steven Spielberg's career. Like, were this to be the last movie he makes, like it would be like a really perfect like just way to tie off his career, because it's like intersecting all of this stuff that he's been doing his whole career in terms of stuff with like parents. There's a lot of Catch Me If You Can and AI like built into this movie in terms of like relationships with fathers and mothers and all that. But it's also like just a treatise on art and filmmaking. Like, there's multiple scenes in this movie where characters sit down with like what is supposed to be like the basically young Spielberg, and like they just talk to him about like what filmmaking is or what art is. Like, there's a scene when his uncle, who had worked in the circus and had then worked in the early film industry, comes and stays with them like just for a couple of days, it seems like, and he just sits down with like young Sam, aka Steven, in his room and talks about art. And like the whole movie has like multiple scenes like that, like where his dad sits him down and is like, here's what a film is, and his mom sits him down and is like, here's what a film is, or here's what music is, or whatever. And like it is a very explainy. I talked earlier about like I liked how We're All Going to the World's Fair doesn't explain. Like, this movie explains every scene. Like, every scene is explication on like that idea of like art and how does an artist grow. How does it affect his relationships with people around him? Like, what does this mean in terms of like, how you view the world? Like, every scene is characters explaining that stuff, but it's just like, it's so fun. And I thought it was moving. I have talked to people for whom like don't really dig like the Steven Spielberg like sentimentality or whatever, and this movie kind of like felt like it was that. And I respect that some people were going to feel that way because like there are a few people out there who don't like Steven Spielberg. But like I think that this is also like it's a much smarter iteration of that sentimentality than like I think some people are willing to give it credit for, because it has this knowingness to it about like to be sentimental is to be manipulative, and to be manipulative is also kind of like an insidious power. I talked about it the other day when I was on the podcast, but that scene, the freaking bully at the in the hall after he's watched the senior skip day movie that Steven Spielberg's character has made is just incredible, and it's like this incredible like just like that scene is a thesis. Again, it's a character explaining something to Sam about what film has done to him. And in this case, it's like this guy who's bullied Sam in high school and has been very anti-Semitic and all this stuff, um, is explaining to him why watching how Sam depicts him on the screen with his camera um, has really messed him up. And like it's just this treatise on this is the power of what filmmaking can do to our ideas about people, and it can remake people from just regular people into like larger than life figures that will never amount like reality will never be able to match those. And there is something so amazing and like inspiring about that. Like the crowd cheered and loved that film, but at the same time, like to see yourself depicted in that way, there's something like horrifying about that, because you know that it's not you, but you know that everyone thinks it's you now. Anyway, this movie's great. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts about it. I'm not sure. I'm repeating a lot of what I said the other day, but
this is my favorite movie of the year. I would co-sign all the things that Michael said about it. I would also add that in addition to doing a lot of great explaining of what the power of film is, it is also just a great demonstration of the power of film. Like it is an amazingly filmed and edited piece of video. And we were talking earlier about the last shot in Crimes of the Future maybe being the best shot of the year. I think that the last shot of The Fabelmans is definitely the best shot of the year. I don't want to explain too much about the context of it, because I think that is something that is delightful to experience as a surprise. But it is a great example, and like a winking example of how like changing the way that something is filmed, changing the perspective with which you view the image, changes the feelings that are evoked by the image itself. The last shot involves the camera that you're looking through kind of being forcibly moved by somebody's hands because it was in the wrong spot. And once it's in the right spot, you're like, oh, wow, that is such an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I will say that like Steven Spielberg, I don't know, like I don't want to like eulogize too much like an old, there's a lot of like hokey Spielberg movies and like a lot of like things about his era of filmmaking that I think are kind of thin. But like one of the things that like I think a lot of people are starting to recognize, like going back and like looking at movies that like people didn't really consider to be significant back in like the 90s or whatever, is recognizing that like contemporary Hollywood struggles, like deeply struggles with technical issues with regards to camera and sound and lighting. And Steven Spielberg has never struggled. Like that is like you go back and watch his like low budget stuff, like Duel or something like that, and that's always like he and his cinematographers always have such an eye for lighting and camera placement that is like uncannily good. And there used to be a better grammar just among the like working technicians in Hollywood, it seems like, than there is now. And I think that a lot of people are kind of like nostalgic for an era in which like technical ability was just kind of a foregone conclusion in Hollywood. But Steven Spielberg specifically was always like so pristine about that. And this movie is like yet another demonstration of like, for all of the movies that are kind of like silly and like inconsequential that he made, like this is why, or one of the reasons why he became such a powerhouse, is that like his eye for imagery is just so incredible. And his eye, he and his like cinematographers and directors of photography and all those, lighting and all that, like the way that in like virtually every Spielberg movie throughout his career, they all come together just to make they're not always like extremely showy movies. Like there's movies like Lincoln or whatever that aren't really like visual feast for the eye, but like just the ability of like knowing how a technique connects to a specific effect on the audience. Like he throughout his career and the teams that he has assembled or worked with has just worked really well with that. And that's kind of a thing throughout the movie too, like how Sam, the young filmmaker, is able to do these things with cameras, like just have this kind of like preternatural ability to like understand what the effect on audience will be of doing a specific camera thing. And some of it is just really fun to watch. This like there's this scene in which he's like filming a war movie with like his like buds in high school or middle school. I can't remember what stage of the movie that's in. And like just the way that he has like shoestring together this like shot that he knows is going to be this amazing shot. If he can just like make all these technical things happen, like that is incredible. Like and one of the things that like is kind of fun about this movie is like a lot of these movies that Sam makes in the film are like remakes of movies that Steven Spielberg made as a teen. And Steven Spielberg got to remake his own movies and then kind of show how he made them as a teenager. And like I know that like he is on the record as saying he remade them a little bit better than they were originally. But like as someone who like played around with cameras a lot, like growing up, like it's hard. Like it's hard to know to do this stuff. Like it's not just like you point and shoot. Like it is there. I don't know. Like I can imagine someone feeling like this is very self-congratulatory if Steven Spielberg saying, "Look how smart I was with cameras as a kid." But like,
but you gotta hand it to him.
You gotta hand it to him. Like it's there. It's there on the screen. You can't deny it.
Yeah. No, I would recommend listening to this interview he did about the movie on Fresh Air. Fascinating. She hits him with this incredible question where he explains the whole first scene where he's a kid and he's experiencing the greatest show on earth and is like terrified and is trying to like process that. And she hits him with this great question about, well, then why are you so hooked on World War II and how to depict World War II? And he goes through this whole thought process about how he views war and that war specifically. He talks about how he didn't storyboard the D-Day scene and Saving Private Ryan. He didn't storyboard any of that.
That is incredible.
He said it's 25 minutes and it took us. We did a minute a day, and I'm like, holy shit, this guy, incredible dude knows how to make them. But anyway, no, this was my number one as well. I've been thinking about it a ton lately, just because a lot of the things that you said, Michael and Andrew, like co-sign all of that. But he just like the way this movie, rather than being the self-aggrandizing movie of, the movies changed my life and this is how it did it. It's more about it's more just digging into how the movies manipulated my life and how I manipulated yours. And like just that kind of like engaging in that level of how movies manipulate, because every movie we'll talk about in this podcast is trying to manipulate you in some way to elicit some sort of reaction. And like it just reminds you that this dude knows how to do it a lot better than a lot of other people. And it's just fascinating. I love every second. And again, last 5-6 minutes of this movie is utter delight.
Just incredible.
So I think it's going to be coming on streaming pretty soon on Peacock and other places, but I don't know. It's much more than just a dude patting himself on the back saying this is how I make movies and what I like about them. I think it really does engage in this level of film craft that is like next level. So, but let's move on. Let's move on to number 2. Michael, that's you as well.
Yeah, which I also talked about on the podcast recently. So I'm not sure how much I'll be repeating myself, but this is The Banshees of Inisherin, which is the new Martin McDonagh movie starring Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, who are living on this small Irish island as the Irish Civil War rages in the mainland in the background. And the premise of the movie is Brendan Gleeson just suddenly decides one day, I'm done with being drinking buddies with Colin Farrell.
It's still so funny.
And the whole movie
I don't want
is
to be
like
his friend anymore.
The whole movie is just that. Like, what happens when these two people who, have hung out with each other every day, one of them doesn't want to hang out with them anymore, and the other one is just perplexed and decides, I got to figure out how to fix this. And I'm going to go to eventually very, very lengthy lengths to try to make sure he never leaves my life, even though he clearly doesn't want me to be in his life anymore. And like that's such a very strange and odd and specific premise for a movie that is honestly like makes that very weird premise as human and funny and fun and ultimately very sad as I can imagine it being. Like it is like this movie has some like shaky things in terms of technical craft. Like we just talked about Spielberg, and this is not like a movie that's going to wow you with technical stuff. The scenery is very nice because it's Ireland. But what you're here for is like the screenplay, which is just like an incredible screenplay. Um, just the way that like everything in this movie is very funny but also very human and oddly like relatable and resonant, and the way that Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell like embody these roles and play off of each other is just very watchable, like just very fun and like enjoyable, um but also ultimately like very tragic and dark, and I liked it a lot. Again, I talked about it a few weeks ago, so I don't feel like I have a lot of new things to say. But just specifically at screenplay level, it's just sharp. The I've never watched Martin McDonagh play, but I know that that's like his background is as a playwright, and the movies are a little bit of a newer thing for him. But this is the first of his movies that I watched that I'm like, you know what, I can imagine this as a play and not losing a ton.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily like a negative thing in my mind, like because I probably would never see this play. Like I don't see plays that often, so I'm glad I got a movie version of it where I can see Colin Farrell's little face like up close.
You get to see his donkey.
His donkey.
You get to hang out with his donkey.
When you're depressed, you bring the donkey in the house.
You got to bring the donkey in the house.
Jessica, I know this was on your list, and you have not talked about it yet. Did you have anything? What stuck out to you about Banshees?
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't on my list. I actually haven't seen this.
I thought it was. Oh, really?
Yeah, no.
I lied.
You should see it. You would like it.
Yeah, you would like this one. There's a donkey, and Colin Farrell's just like, this is my donkey.
It's crazy. There were so many like movies that just came out towards the end of the year that were like just sleeper. Like they just showed up and I didn't hear anything about them. There was no marketing. There was like literally nothing. And I was
marketing
like,
has been very off this year.
Yeah.
I was just walking by posters and then I saw it and I was like, is this in Bruges too? Like, what is happening? I was like, I have no idea what this is. I didn't hear anything about it. So
Zach,
yes, I do want to watch it.
Speaking of In Bruges, you just rewatched In Bruges, right, Zach?
Yeah.
How would you say this ranks compared to that?
This one's much more mature. Like In Bruges, In Bruges is more mature than I think I was. Like you kind of give it credit for. It's not like this. Let's just be obnoxious Tarantino type thing. Like I think we talked a couple weeks ago that it does lean on that, but it also is dealing and kind of processing heavier themes than a Tarantino movie, and so you have just kind of this chaos and language and violence that is kind of culminating out of that, but at the same time it's kind of handling stuff in a way that you're like, okay, like this is working on a much higher level than something like something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or some of his or The Hateful Eight or some of his recent stuff. So I still really like that one. That's probably my number 2, but I think this one will probably crop up as the number 1 just because it's a lot more subdued. It's taking a lot of what's good about that and really like kind of bringing it down and focusing it a lot more. You get a lot more, you get to focus a lot more on the characters, the Brendan Gleeson and the Colin Farrell characters. And it also just kind of has really much more complete characters around them than you do in Bruges. Like in Bruges, Ray Fiennes shows up halfway through and is just calling everybody the C word and just like firing off left and right, which is fun, but it's not like he's a very complex character.
Right.
And in this one, you have Colin Farrell's the sister character. You have the Barry Keoghan character. You have even some of the characters like at the pub that you run into constantly, like are like kind of these fully formed people by the end of the movie. And like I mentioned again, like before we stop talking about this, I have to mention like Barry Keoghan. Honestly, probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, performance in a movie this year. Like his
That
performance
man
in this one
very
is
good.
incredible.
Keeps finding new types of weirdos to be.
Yeah, like I just love him because it's such a specific character, and he like gives it so much more life than probably anybody else would have. And I'm just like this is just a good old performance in this. Really love that dude in this movie.
Best supporting actor goes to Barry Keoghan.
Yeah.
has declared it.
It's kind of for those who haven't seen it, he's very like he's working on the same wavelength as like the Green Knight, and like weirdo characters like that. But he like I don't know, there's just this real. I've seen people sharing the scene with him and Colin Farrell's sister in this movie. The scene between those two characters.
Oh my gosh!
And it's just
such a scene.
and it's fucking crushing. It's so goddamn good, and the way he acts it is just so. I'm so sad that he's unfortunately getting pulled into like the Batman machine and is going to have to play like the Joker in this Batman.
What's
movies.
the line in that movie? Is something like, "Well, there goes that dream," or something like that.
Yeah, he's just like, "Well, there goes that dream."
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And just walks off, and it's very like he just like walks off and just runs out of the and you're just like, oh my god, it's so sad. Yeah, this is on HBO Max now, so if you've not seen it, definitely check it out. I think it's much more complex than you would than what you've been getting out of Martin McDonagh lately.
As with RRR, there is a political backdrop to this that I think that like we as Americans maybe are not quite privy to. This is in some ways like an allegory about the IRA and then the other nationalists group that was part of the Irish Civil War, and the fact that I can't name it now is bugging me. But regardless, there is like a whole thing with that, and like if you want to go down the rabbit hole of what this is trying to say about the Irish Civil War, which is like maybe would complicate your feelings about the movie depending on how you feel about the Irish Civil War. Like there's that too if you choose to go down that rabbit hole, because like that's always in the background is the Civil War, and people like read headlines about the Civil War and things like that. So but I think it also works like perfectly well. It's just simply like a dramatic piece between like these two characters.
Totally.
Cool.
If you want to learn more about the Irish Civil War, just watch Dairy Girls because
Dairy Girls.
Dairy Girls so good.
I would also say that unlike a lot of the things on this list, like Crimes of the Future or We're All Going to the World's Fair, this is a movie you could like sit down with your parents and watch. Like it is a very
your parents don't care about the cussing
movie. Yeah.
The accents are so thick you don't even know what's really happening.
Was that a cuss word? I couldn't tell with the bro.
Yeah.
Does feck count as a cuss word?
Yeah, does feck count as a cuss word? It's honestly it's a plus that it's on HBO Max now because you can drop those subtitles on and you're like, I know what's going on.
Hell yeah. I rewatched it with subtitles and it was a much better experience than watching it in the theater, honestly.
It's tough Irish, but yeah. All right.
Does anybody's parents really care about curses anymore?
Not mine.
Oh, my parents do 100%. My parents
really? I was like
couldn't
dropping F-bombs at the table on my dad. I didn't even realize it. And my dad was like, can you just chill out a little bit with the F word specifically? And I'm like, all right.
You're like the Marge Simpson meme of like, hey kids, can we take it down like a little bit?
And I was like, whoops, I forgot.
Yeah. All right. Well, drum roll, please. Number one movie of the year is going to Jessica.
The movie that made the sales of Everything Bagels go up by at least 70%. Everything, everywhere, all.
Don't fact
once.
check us. It happened.
I don't know if that's real or not, but I definitely ate more Everything Bagels after I watched it.
There you go.
But I didn't eat more hot dogs because there's lots of weird hot dog stuff in this movie. But yeah, so honestly, like I loved this movie when I watched it. When I saw like the marketing for it and the trailers, it was like one of those trailers that I watched where I was like, I have to go see this as soon as it comes out. I have to go see it. I have to go to the theater to see it. I was very, very excited about it. the fact that like we haven't had more movies starring Michelle Yeoh is a crime of the present that has happened. She's an amazing actress. Never like this is the movie that gave her the opportunity to show off everything that she's learned throughout her entire career and has like given her the recognition that she deserves. And so the film is directed by the Daniels, and they're called the Daniels, who you know from the farting corpse movie Swiss Army Man that they made their name off of. And
also
it is
Turn
about
Down for What video.
Turn Down for What video? Maybe their best work.
They're the duo that transitioned from like music videos into filmmaking, and this is their second feature film. And it stars Michelle Yeoh, and she's a Chinese immigrant who has a laundromat business, and she's getting audited, which is every small business owner's nightmare. And she is just kind of dead inside, honestly. Like when the movie starts, she's very like withered. She's not paying a whole lot of attention to her family. She has a daughter played by Stephanie Hsu, and her husband is Jonathan K. Kwan, who came out of retirement for this movie, which in itself is amazing. You might know him from things like Goonies and Indiana Jones. Whenever he was a kid, he was in those films. And then nobody saw him for a really long time, and then he just showed up in this movie, which was
They
kind
didn't even
of
cast
crazy.
him. He just showed up on set.
Yeah,
they were like, he's here now.
He was like, this is my role. But there's some weird like sci-fi stuff that happens with like multiverses, and Michelle Yeoh's character is basically told like you have to save the world. Like you have to save the universe. This is your new mission, and she's given this kind of like sort of purpose that she doesn't really understand, and has to fight like the evil boss, which you find out later is like her daughter. And it's all kind of just like a big metaphor for her accepting her daughter who is queer, and she doesn't really acknowledge that she's also has a failing marriage and is about to file for divorce. Like her husband is trying to get her to sign divorce papers, so like all of her shit is falling apart, and she has kind of just been living her life like very passively. And like I found it to be like a very touching movie, and it technically is also amazing. Like the shots in it are insane. In the multiverse like storyline, you're taken into Michelle Yeoh playing like a bunch of different characters and living like all of these past lives, and all of those things were like very interesting to see. It's a lot. Like a lot of people describe the movie as like chugging an energy drink like at the very beginning of it, and then kind of just being blasted through the whole rest of the movie. I found it to be like very genuine. I know lots of criticisms would say that it's like corny and redundant, and I understand both of those criticisms, but for me, the story was strong enough to land me in a place that made the movie extremely meaningful. And I do think that the runtime could have been trimmed. There were lots of like little snippets in there that I think didn't necessarily need to be in there. But the part,
right?
It's like
2
hours and 40 minutes.
Oh, okay.
It's like 2 hours and 40 minutes, but it probably feels longer because of the energy. Like it is a lot. But the parts in the film where it kind of like takes a break and is showing, like I always like in the Daniels movies before, like in Swiss Army Man, there's like also a part in it where it goes down into the existentialism that the movie is like really trying to boil down to. And in Swiss Army Man, it is when they show kind of like a body decaying, and it shows like his body turning into a skeleton and like decaying into the earth. And there's like a whole thing about us existing and like the meaning of life. And in Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's like two rocks that are talking to each other, and they have googly eyes, and they're kind of just like thinking about like why they're there and going over just like time and things like that. And what I got from the movie is that even so, like it is basically like an immigrant story. And when you've like sacrificed all of these things to build this American dream and to build this life that you want, like all you know is struggle and all you know is how to be hard. There's no way to be soft, because if you are, then you can't give your family the life that you've sacrificed everything to give to them. And so she has to relearn like how to love her family and to see them for everything that they are. It's really easy to like resent people who you've sacrificed everything for. And I think that a lot of immigrant stories like kind of delve into that, where children of immigrants are now able to, they probably go to therapy and they're now able to create these stories where they're expressing how they think their parents felt whenever they sacrificed everything to give them this dream life, but the child maybe didn't turn out to be in this like box that their parents were like trying to put them in as like the American ideal. And I think that the way that the movie handles that story, I think they do it really well, and I think that it is very heartfelt. And I didn't find it to be like corny at all, despite the humor is like very silly in the movie. There's a whole bit that one of the bits that I like really appreciated was the Rakakuni bit, because
Oh my God.
Very funny. Yeah.
Pretty funny.
like as like my mom also like it was is an immigrant, and also English is her second language, and I can't tell you how many times like she has gotten movie titles wrong, or has like just completely given me like I am now sort of cursed with like I don't know sayings, like I get them mixed up all the time. I'll say like ducks in order instead of ducks in a row. Like they were told to me incorrectly, so I learned them like wrong. And I think that was like a really smart little thing to put into the movie. But I also like one of the things that I really loved. I want to read Paige's review of this movie, because I thought that it was really well put and very good. Just let me find it real quick.
Quick page.
So Paige said, "Shout out to all my fellow agents and victims of chaos who find peace and refuge in the form of someone who walks by your side as actual human sunshine," which I think is so good. Like in the movie, like Michelle Yeoh's character and Jonathan K. Kwan's character like balance each other out very well, and she sort of learns that his strength is not, because he's seen as like a very passive, weak character, and she throughout the movie figures out like his strength is found elsewhere, like it's not in his like physical strength or in his hardness, like he has strength in his kindness, and she figures that out towards the end of the movie in very beautiful Wong Kar-wai-esque scenes which are amazing as well. But yeah, the movie just it has a lot. It's trying to do a lot, but I think that it all comes together in a cohesive way. And whereas some people would find it kind of hitting the same point over and over again redundant, I found it like entertaining and also reaffirming of like what the movie was trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I know you're big, or you're a fan of this as well.
Yeah, I do like it. I'm probably the person Jessica's talking about where I have said it's the same point a lot. It's maybe too long, but I liked it. I thought it was funny. One of the things that I thought like on a meta level is kind of like amazing to me about this movie was how dang popular this movie became.
Oh yeah.
Which if you look on paper, I don't know that I would have assumed that this movie would have become like I think the biggest A24 movie of the year, and like just anecdotally, like I don't like work with a lot of people or really talk with a lot of people outside of the folks on this podcast who are really tuned into movies. Maybe that's not true. There's a few other people, but regardless, a lot of times people will come up to me and be like, "Have you seen X movie?" And it's usually the new Avengers movie or whatever. But like this movie was the one that the most people talked to me about this year. They're like, "Hey, have you heard of Everything Everywhere All at Once, or have you seen that movie?" And I think that that's kind of amazing that a movie that is not really like a, it doesn't tie into an IP. It's got a fairly like convoluted, like esoteric, like mythology to it. It is, about like an immigrant story, like it's got all these things that like I think like historically on paper we wouldn't say like that's a blockbuster movie. But like I think it's really like inspiring in a way. Like a lot of our conversations over the past couple of years, like since COVID on this podcast have had to do with like maybe the diminishing returns of like theatrical distribution and like how like there are like trends in like American filmmaking that are kind of dispiriting because they're kind of bankrupt commercially and creatively and like all that sort of stuff. But like this is like a really, I don't know, for me it's like an inspiring bright spot that a movie that is very idiosyncratic, very like driven by a like the vision that the filmmakers have, like that is seems personal to them and is certainly personal to a lot of people, including, on this podcast, like that is, this energetic, like I don't think it's flawless, but it's like it's a movie. It's not like it's not an obligation movie, which I think is like so many movies that come out now. And like this is ended up being one of the more popular movies of the year. And like I really like that about this movie. Like it's got a nice meta narrative to it that I'm into. As well as the things that Jessica said. Like I think this movie has a good, like a really solid, like emotional core. Like the characters make sense. Like as much as like I alluded to, like I felt like it was too long or whatever. Like it has good bones, which is something that again, like I find myself griping a lot about modern movies. Is like no one knows how to write a screenplay anymore. Like characters are incoherent in movies so often, but like these characters make sense and I care about them. And I like that the movie makes me care about them, rather than me, it doesn't feel like there's like obligatory like emotional beats. Like the emotional beats feel organic to what this movie wants the characters to be, even as wacky and out there as this movie is. So yeah, I don't know. It's good. I'm glad it's on this list. I'm glad it's the movie on this list that probably most people are most likely to have seen.
Yeah,
to be honest.
This and Nope.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking with Banshees about how like it didn't get any marketing. This one is like the opposite of that.
They marketed the crap.
They marketed this movie pretty well, because it was kind of one of those. It kind of came out and there was like I think a buzz amongst people like ourselves, like you described, Michael, who's like kind of engaged with movies and are like, oh, this is like this seems like something interesting, and then started to trickle out into more mainstream fare as it got a wider release, which was kind of interesting. Is it just the largest A24 release for this year, or is it all time? I thought it was all time.
I'm sure it's the highest grossing A24 release of all time.
Yeah, I would assume so because it's made a bunch of money.
Yeah,
and I'm surprised that it didn't do better on like the ranking of all movies that came out this year. I just looked up the IMDb list of like the highest grossing films, and it's all the way down at 35. I thought that it would be, if not in the top 10, like just outside of it, considering how many people I also heard talking about this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wasn't a giant fan of this movie, but one of the things that it did bring next to RRR is like some of the most interesting film writing that I read this year. There was a number of reviews, pro and con, about this movie on specifically Letterboxd, that I found to be really fascinating, whether you like the movie a whole lot or you didn't like the movie. And so like on that level, I appreciated this movie generated some critical thinking that, we just don't get necessarily with a lot of the other movies that are coming out this year. You're not, when Ant-Man whatever comes out, you're not getting a lot of critical thinking about it. And like this one had people thinking,
you didn't see those incredible essays about Black Adam?
I didn't, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh, you missed out.
But this movie, like there was some really like, there was some really, really panning reviews of this that I thought brought a really interesting perspective, as well as ones who were really, really positive. And so just on that level, I appreciated it for getting people to think.
And Nope as well. This and Nope seem to be like the two biggest pop culture movies that have been very divisive. And I ended up being in the con column on both of those movies, but I understand why people who like them, and I've really enjoyed reading about them and thinking about them all year. And I'm really glad that a movie by an independent duo of directors who have like their own personal point of view and are doing new, interesting, strange things has popped off to the extent that it has.
And they I don't know, maybe somebody they turned down a Marvel thing, right? Like
they did turn down a Marvel thing,
and
yeah,
then ended up making this, right?
yeah. Good for them.
Good for them.
And also with this film, like they have given spotlight to lots of Chinese actors who have been doing this for like a really long time. Like I first saw Stephanie Hsu on Nora from Queens, and she plays Shu Shu on Nora from Queens, which is really good. But these are all like Chinese actors who have been doing this thing for a really long time, and people haven't given them lots of credit or notice, but they've been sweeping at awards. Like Stephanie Hsu won for like the Asian Film Actors Award. Like she won like Best Breakout Performance.
Oh yeah.
Well, one of them.
I hope also this movie introduces people to. Like, I hope this is like a Rosetta Stone type movie. You know, there are those movies that come around every once in a while that introduce new types of movies to new people, and like, there's an extended like "In the Mood for Love" riff in this movie that like I hope introduces people to that. And that's true of a couple different like things in this movie that are like riffs on other types of movies. And I hope that like in addition to like exposing these this cast to maybe new opportunities, I hope it exposes like viewers to new opportunities as well, because I think that this movie could be that.
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to mention one other actor. I don't think you mentioned him before, but the actor who plays the Michelle Yeoh character's father, James Hong. That's a dude who's been in everything. That dude's been doing it for a long time, and like that, in terms of actors, kind of getting a little bit of spot. He's not given a lot in this one compared to others, but still, like James Hong's been doing it longer than most people.
His breakout performance in Kung Fu Panda. As Poe's father, the bird who the crane who owns the noodle shop.
Yeah. He also had a great role in Wendell and Wild, which is another movie that had just a lot of stuff going on. Too much for me, but I am glad that it exists.
Yeah, I always think of him as the maitre d' at the Chinese restaurant in the Seinfeld episode.
Oh, and can we also take
Yeah.
note of the fact that James Hong is in Turning Red, which is a movie I was hoping would be on this list, but
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised it's not on this list.
Yeah.
Are we doing honorable mentions now?
Let's get into honorable mentions.
That's a good segue.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, if everybody wants to kind of run through their list and name a couple that didn't make the top 10, we can do that.
You start, Jessica.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, Andrew mentioned Turning Red, but yeah, like Turning Red was a really, really good movie. It was sad because it just showed up on Disney Plus, right? Like it didn't go to theaters at all, and it was like the best Disney movie of the year, period. I mean, it was amazing. Also, I dyed my hair red, literally inspired by Turning Red.
Oh, wow.
Because it was so good. Iconic. Anyways, so that one is really enjoyable. It's on Disney Plus, and also just a great story about immigrants as well, like being a child of an immigrant. The director, she made the Bow short that everyone thought was super weird, but I also loved it. And she has a really good way of filming food. Like there's a scene in Turning Red when they're making like a stir fry, and the way that they like animated the food is so good. And you might also know Turning Red as the movie that pissed off conservatives because it talked about having a period, and
shout out
they were like, is Turning Red about hormones? Question mark.
It's about being horny.
Little girls.
It was one of the first great like grooming panics of 2022, a year that had many grooming panics.
It's a movie that's called Turning Red, that they didn't link in on that. Like they didn't like go, oh, let's get into our fears in that realm.
Like,
they were like, no, hormones.
Surprise, y'all! Women have periods. Blood comes out. I didn't know if you knew that or not, but it's a thing that happens.
Ben Shapiro learned about it, so that was big for him.
Another movie that I saw that I thought was really good that I saw some buzz on Letterboxd about it was Fresh. I don't know if y'all heard about that horror
Mm-mm.
film.
A lot of folks saw that. Yeah.
It's directed by Mimi Cave, and it's a cannibal movie. I guess that's a spoiler, but literally the poster is of a hand in a package, and it stars uh, Daisy Edgar Jones, who is in what's that? Is
Oh
it Worst
yeah,
Person?
Normal People. It's the one on
No,
Hulu,
Normal
right?
People. That's right. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
also
yeah.
liked that show, and it was good. But also, Sebastian Stan is in
Yeah.
it as the antagonist, and he's like a super rich guy who she meets him at the grocery store, and she's like sick and tired of dating apps, and she's like, I just want to meet a guy regular, like I just want to be at the grocery store and a guy compliments me and we start dating, and they start hanging out and talking to each other. And her friend who is a black woman is way more worried about her safety. She's like, hey, you can't just trust like white guys all the time. Like you can't just like if a guy is like, like you need to meet him at a public place. And of course Sebastian Stan is like very charming, and he's like, actually I want to take you away, like, let's go, like they're only known each other for a couple of days, and he's like, let's go for the weekend to this like getaway. And her friend is immediately like, this guy is gonna murder you. Like she is like, there's no way that you should trust him. And it turns out he is trying to murder her, but it is actually worse than that. He keeps women captive and like cuts their limbs off and sells the meat, because apparently there's a market for men who have pictures of women, and they know like what they look like when they're eating their flesh. And so he like keeps them alive. He keeps them alive and chained up and tries to fatten them up so that he can cut them piece by piece and like sell their meat to people. And I've always thought Sebastian Stan was like a creepy actor. I've always thought he had like a huge head and looked like super weird, but he like the movie turns out to have kind of like a pretty feminist like message in it, and is really good. I was surprised by how fresh it was.
Oh man,
You did it.
And it's like, there you go, just goes back to liking cannibal movies. We've circled back around.
Man, been too long.
Any honorable mentions, Momali?
Yeah, I'm just gonna briefly mention one and then talk about two more. We've talked about all these on the podcast, but I just want to shout out to Tar, which was one of the more like another good film writing piece of filmmaking. I like Tar, but two that I think people maybe forgot because they were released earlier in the year is, first of all, Robert Eggers' The Northman.
It almost made the list.
I loved this movie. The more I've thought about it, the more I like this movie, which is like a Icelandic saga adapted into like a film that is on the surface kind of like a He-Man, like Viking action movie kind of, but is much more complicated at its roots. Not nearly as good as Robert Eggers' previous two movies, which is maybe why some people forgot about it. But I think that it is worth people's time, especially because it's, again, like it's just a dang movie. Like the climax takes place in an erupting volcano with people who are naked and fighting with swords. Like you can't, like that. There's just something right about your movie.
What more do you want?
The volcano is also referred to as the gates of hell.
Yes. There's a lot in this movie that just is like, you just need that like heavy metal, like, it's there. This is a movie full of like metal album covers, and I love that. The other one that I think people may have forgotten, or maybe people didn't see enough, was Steven Soderbergh's Kimmy,
yes,
which
cosign.
is really
I need to
good.
see that.
Thriller that's like kind of like Rear Window, kind of like what's the De Palma movie?
Blowout.
John Travolta. Yeah, kind of like Blowout. In which the main character is supposed to be reviewing footage that's been flagged by users on like basically an Alexa, and she thinks that she's heard a murder on this, and so she has to investigate. And it's just like, one, it's a great thriller. Two, it's like contemporary and like got like the social commentary stuff, but without being like, I didn't feel like it was annoying about it. It's got the COVID stuff in it. It all feels really organic. And I imagine in like 20 years, if people like return back to this, they're not going to think. I think there's a lot of contemporary stuff in film now, in a lot of culture now, that probably people will return back to it and be like, wow, I can't. They're talking about this in an embarrassing way, and this doesn't feel like it's going to be that. But it's also just like, even if you don't care about that stuff, it's just a great little thriller. It's like 90 minutes, maybe less than 90 minutes, and it just goes. Balls to the wall the whole time. Like, it's good. So those are my 2 honorable mentions. Plus Tar.
Andrew?
So I will very briefly co-sign Turning Red. That was one that made my list that I was hoping would make this one. A movie that proves that Disney can make good movies if they give good movies to good filmmakers and let them do what they want with them. I would also like to shout out a movie called Watcher that Jessie would definitely be talking about right now if she was on this podcast. This is her favorite movie of the year, I believe. It is another one of these thrillers about people watching and being watched. And it is directed in a way that kind of reminds me of people like Roman Polanski or Michael Haneke, and maybe even at times Chantal Akerman, in the way that shots get held, and the framing of those shots is chosen very intentionally. Stars Micah Monroe, who should be in more movies. She's an incredible movie star. And this was one of the best thrillers I've seen in a couple years. Also want to shout out a couple movies I saw at TIFF. Moon Age Daydream, the found footage documentary by Brett Morgan about David Bowie, which is just this psychedelic experience so different than any other rock documentary you've ever seen. And a movie that I don't think is in wide distribution yet, but maybe will be available on places like the Criterion Channel or Mubi or somewhere later, No Bears by Jafar Panahi. That guy, if you have not kept up with the ongoing story of Jafar Panahi's attempts to make cinema, despite the fact that the Iranian government has barred him from doing so legally, is a really incredible feat. This movie especially. And he is in prison now, and I hope that he gets out of prison soon and is able to make movies again, because he's real good at it.
I feel so bad about that movie because I fell asleep during it.
Oh my god!
Oh no!
Also, I should say I wrote this in my review on the TIFF coverage we did, but me and Zach were sitting in the theater for No Bears. It was the press premiere of this movie, and 30 minutes in, there's a freeze frame, or there was a freeze frame that just lasted for minutes and minutes, and it took a very long time for people in the audience to be like, okay, this isn't actually in the movie. Because like it is a movie that does so much with like the meta element of film that people thought that it might be an elaborate arc prank. And this is the kind of movie that could have something like that in it.
I don't know. I was sleepy at the time. I'm really bummed I didn't get the full experience. It was good when I watched it, though.
He went to jail so Zach could sleep.
That's why I feel worse. So I don't know. I was looking at my top 10. I'm so base this year. I don't know what to tell you. One that came out,
Based
I think technically
or basic?
20.
Those things are very different.
Basic.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure it's based as well.
What's based?
It's good.
Yeah, what is based? Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
Google it.
Okay.
Your kids will tell you one day.
What?
I have to have kids to learn what this word means? All right, whatever. I don't know shit. One of the ones, it came out last year, but I think it got wider distribution this year. It's on the Criterion Channel now. Actually, he made 2 movies last year. Ryuichi Urisuke Hamaguchi. He made Drive My Car, but he also made Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy. I really like Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy. Check it out if you can. It's split up. I think, Michael, I think we talked about it. It's split up into 3 different stories. All like I think we talked about at the time. It's tough to make movies like that where you have like different stories and they all kind of progressively are good or get better or whatever. This one is like the peak. It's like all the stories are good or getting better the entire time.
If people are on the fence about this movie, what you need to know is that one of the segments is about some students who find out that their professor has written a novel that contains a very like spicy sex scene, and one of them is going to go try to seduce the professor by reading the sex scene to him in his office.
It's great. One of them I thought might creep up into the top 10 because I know this was Reed's favorite movie, but Ambulance, Michael Bay, man, the dude, like we're talking about action filmmaking in RRR. The closest America got to it this year was with Ambulance. It has drone shots in this that are absolutely insane. Where like it starts on the top of a building, rides down the building, and catches up in motion with the action. I just Ambulance. I wish Reed was here and we could just talk about Ambulance. In terms of also like just maximalist filmmaking, Elvis made its way into my top 10. Elvis is insane. Love that movie. That's all I got. I also mentioned I also had Kimmy in mind as well, but the other one, Official Competition, which is this kind of satire of like film festivals and awards that stars Penelope Cruz and Antonio Banderas. I don't think it's got wide distribution yet, but if it does, it's worth checking out because it's incredibly funny. Where it's just kind of spoofing the whole actors, director, like that whole combination. Where you have Penelope Cruz playing this director and Antonio Banderas playing this kind of movie star actor who's like coming to do like a more artsy drama. Super funny. It includes this scene, a really great scene where they think that they're going to be lifting up a massive boulder only to learn that the boulder is being held up by like a machine and you couldn't see the machine. It's great. But check it out. But yeah, other than that, I feel like I have a really basic top 10. I mean, I have Top Gun and Jackass Forever in my top 10 list. So.
I was a little surprised that Jackass didn't make our top 10.
Dude, it's awesome. My version of the inside outtakes is watching Jackass 4.5.
There you go. I would like to note that Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy was in our top 10 last year.
Bringing it back, baby.
Yeah, that's right.
Years are a social construct.
Yeah,
that's true,
man.
Also, Batman is really good.
Yeah, that's
Batman.
Batman is good, and it brought back that Nirvana song. That's like
it's something in the way. They should have had. Did y'all ever have the Nirvana CD that had something in the way at the end, but then there was like 20 minutes of silence, and then there was another song after it? They should have done that at the end of the credits.
But it's like legitimately so weird because now every time I hear that song, I only think of Batman.
I did out of all the kind of superhero output, Batman is high and above the best. Because it's just such a weird, moody movie with Robert Pattinson. It is pretty
so
fun.
weird. Paul Dano's the Riddler, and he's so creepy and so gross.
The second best Colin Farrell performance of this year is in the Batman.
Yeah, it is. I loved Colin Farrell so much in that movie. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap up for the most part. But before we go, Andrew, I'm going to have you introduce our next series that we're going to be kicking off 2023 with.
Our next series is going to be one of the artsiest series that Cinematary has ever done. And that is a series on the Muppets, which has become
going nuts.
It's become a bit of an obsession in my household, me and Jesse. And we would like to share this obsession with the world. So in the series that we're about to embark upon, which is a 4-week series, we are going to get the full scope of what the Muppets are, because they are such a weird, idiosyncratic, unique form of cinema, and there's a lot of different aspects as to why we will explore over the course of the series. But in the first episode, we're just going to look at both the pilot of the Muppet Show and the first Muppet movie, which came in 1979. just as kind of a way to get our bearings of like what exactly is the Muppets, how do they introduce themselves to the world, how is that kind of this unique collaborative art form. In the second episode, we're going to talk specifically about Jim Henson, who's sort of the brainchild behind all of the Muppets. He only ever directed one Muppet movie, and in my opinion, it's the best Muppet movie, The Great Muppet Caper. So that'll be our second episode. In the third one, we're going to look at the period of time when the Muppets were just doing like these literary adaptations in the 90s and early 2000s. One that a lot of people will probably know is Muppet Christmas Carol. We're not going to do that one, actually. We're going to do Muppet Treasure Island and this TV movie they made called Muppet Wizard of Oz that may be bad, but I've never seen it and I would like to see it. And then we're going to end with our last episode about the Disney acquisition of the Muppets, which happened in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Disney put out 2 Muppet movies, one of which I think is really bad and one of which I think is really good. But we'll talk about the current state of Muppetdom to round it out. So yeah, come back and check out the Muppets with us.
Read my grad school thesis, The Current State of Muppetdom. No, it sounds good. It's unfortunately we're going to be giving a lot of action to Disney Plus, but
that's where they all are. Yeah,
that's where they all are. So we'll work through that ourselves. All right. Until then, everybody have a wonderful 2023 Cinematary. We'll be back with the Muppets. Goodbye.
Good episode.